Let's get to this governor's race on the Republican side. Ed Gillespie, here are the announced candidates. Ed Gillespie, the front runner, no doubt. Rob Whitman, Congressman, 1st District, expected, we think, is going to get out because he's going to be named Sea Power Committee Chairman. We'll talk about that. Frank Wagner from Virginia Beach, Senator, State Senator, never count him out, I say. And Corey Stewart, the chairman of Prince William County, the one-time co-chairman with me of the Trump campaign in Virginia, who was unceremoniously fired by the Trump campaign in October. Of course, getting fired from the Trump campaign, not easy to do, especially when you're a volunteer. You got to be pretty bad to get fired as a volunteer. That's Corey Stewart's legacy now. But let's get to this race. I'm going to start with Aaron Gulbranson. Aaron, because there's a new entrant we think is going to come in. Why don't you tell our audience what you think? Who is this guy and what's the deal?
There's some speculation about a gentleman by the name of Denver Riggleman, the owner of Silverback Distillery in Afton, Virginia, which is just outside Charlottesville, I believe. And he would have to, I think if he gets into the race, he spells the end for Corey Stewart because he takes the air out of the Trump-type candidate with and he starts off with a blank slate, and he could be all things to all people if he catches fire. So it'll be interesting.
Former intelligence officer, overt, not covert, and we understand that he has killed terrorists in the Middle East, is what I've heard from people. So,
with his bare hands?
Well, all I can tell you is that this is a pretty good combination. Here's your candidate. Okay, so what are your credentials? Well, I've shot terrorists and I make booze. I mean, right there, right? I shoot bad guys and make whiskey. Not a bad platform here in Virginia.
That's the bumper sticker.
I shoot bad guys and make whiskey.
You want to talk about a candidate that could connect with rural Virginia? There you go.
All right, here's a tweet here. Oh, we're back to the Randy Forbes thing. People get so upset about Randy Forbes. Okay, so this comes out of the blue from Brian in Chesapeake. Why is Donald Trump considering Randy Forbes for anything? I don't want him as Secretary of the Navy. I don't want him for anything. He abandoned his district for his own self-interest and blah, 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 blah. Lost his primary, blah, 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 blah. I'm a Trump supporter, but I'll be infuriated if he appoints Forbes as Secretary of the Navy. What? I got listeners that really don't like Randy Forbes. I got to tell you that. I don't know what's going on.
Do you think there are policy disagreements, or is it purely that he left his district to run somewhere else?
Left his
Not
district.
That that's an insignificant
left
thing.
His district. Well, also,
but they liked him when they were his congressman. Then
I think so. I mean, he was pretty conservative. I mean, I didn't agree with him on trade and stuff.
And he was very available. He was always in the district. We talk about people forgetting their districts. That wasn't Randy Forbes.
Came on my show all the time. And look, I was mad that he abandoned my district. He was my congressman. Now I'm stuck with Don McKeechin.
And he may have won that seat. That race was a lot closer than I think folks thought it would be.
He could have won. But let's get back here to Denver Riggleman. So he gets in. Aaron, I agree with you 100%. If he gets in for Corey Stewart, turn out the lights, the party's over. That campaign goes from something to nothing very fast.
Well, and Corey does have the negatives from being, dismissed from the Trump campaign.
Fired.
Yeah. Well, that's your word, not mine. But
Fired.
Yes, there you go. But no, and the thing is Corey has out-Trumped Trump, but does that make is that an asset to him? Riggleman with a blank slate is able to take the things that the Virginia voters in the Republican primary liked about Trump and superimpose that on himself if he's disciplined, and then also appeal to different groups of people because nobody knows him. Now, that's the other thing. He's got to raise a heck of a lot of money to get people to accept whatever message he's going to be giving, assuming it's not just free booze for everybody. Which that could be a very powerful message too. But it's interesting when you have a candidate like this that nobody knows, and I just don't know what to expect right now.
Do we all think that Whitman in the next 2 days is going to get out of the race? Andrew?
Yes.
Chris?
All signs point to that.
Yes.
All right.
And this is not wanting him to. This is his thinking he is, because I think Rob is a fantastic candidate.
Well, see, and I think he is going to get out. I think he's going to be named the Sea Power Subcommittee Chairman. But my take on this, and let's get everybody's opinion, I think Whitman getting out without Riggleman helps Stewart, and I'll tell you why. Whitman gave Trump voters a safe haven to go to, right? They're kind of uncomfortable with the whole Corey Stewart got fired thing and what that was about. Wagner came late. Maybe they don't know him. Gillespie got separate issues. Whitman was a safe haven. You take Whitman out, and where are they going to go? I mean, I think it's an opening for Riggleman. I think a lot of them go over to Stewart. No?
Maybe Wagner's making a play for the Trump voters as well. I mean, he's pitching his speech at the Trump rally. He's saying he was a Trump co-chairman that wasn't fired. He's making a strong play for that.
Well, look.
So Riggleman's biggest problem, I think, is it's one thing to come as not even a dark horse, but a no-name candidate and go into a convention because you have a much smaller audience. You know who's coming out via pre-file forms. You know how to reach them. With the primary, you've got to be everywhere. That takes a lot of money. How do you boost your name ID so that someone who's never heard of your whiskey and never heard of you knows who you are with no history? You can't just Google this guy. You Google Frank Wagner, you Google Corey Stewart, you're going to get a pretty good idea of who they are and what their background is.
Okay, so let's go through the candidates. Let's start at the top with the acknowledged front runner. Ed Gillespie has all the money. His campaign staff, he's put a lot of people together. They released an email with 17 or 18 people. Chris Levitt, his campaign manager, back for, I guess, a second stint with him. They took Matt Moran from the speaker to be his communications director.
Fantastic hire, Matt Moran.
Fantastic hire. He's got a couple other solid people with him, different political campaigns. So let's go to Boyd Marcus. I mean, on paper, Gillespie looks like the guy, right? The favorite. What do you think?
I think he clearly starts off as the front runner. He's the only one that's run statewide and, actually done reasonably well. But you also can't take the results from a previous election and say that, that's going to make it automatically. He's going to get the same votes again. I mean, it was a different year and a different time. I mean, it was in a middle of a big anti-Washington, anti-Obama sweep that he did well. Now we're running in a state election. This is a governor's election. It's a different thing. You're running against different people. You're running different issues. And I think that the biggest thing that he has to do is articulate a message that's relevant to the state and to state issues, and not be the Washington guy. And
how?
Clearly he, from the best I can tell, he seems to be going to be focused on. He's going to focus on the economy, and he's going to focus on what hasn't happened in Virginia under the McAuliffe administration. Clearly you look at Virginia and its drop in rankings under the national business categories. We used to be with number 2 or number 3 all the time, every year. Now we're down into the 10s and 12 rankings. I mean, that's not good numbers. The economy hasn't grown as fast in Virginia as it has in other parts of the country. Part of that is the federal government's cutbacks. We all know that. But he's got to show that the glass is not half full.
Right, so
it's more than half empty.
What he has is money and name ID, right?
That's right.
What does he lack? What do you think of his staff? What do you think of his campaign leadership?
I think it's a matter of you got to prove. You got to show what you're going to do, and you got to prove it. I don't think anybody's got.
So
nobody.
What does he lack?
What does he lack?
One word.
He lacks message is the number one thing. The other is he's untested in a lot of ways because, Mark Warner never took him very seriously, so he didn't land any body blows on him.
Chris.
Winning campaigns come down to organization, money, and messaging. He'll have the organization, he'll have the money. The question for Ed Gillespie is, does he have the message and what that message is? And he's been around the state, and he knows the state far better than I think a lot of the candidates that we've mentioned so far, and he's connected with those voters, especially in the committees. So he'll have an advantage going in, but can he translate that to votes by showing, and I think he'll probably bring out and should bring out a campaign plan that is more regional and local than it is statewide. You have to have an overriding statewide message, growing the economy, jobs, et cetera. But on the local level, can you go down to Southwest Virginia and sell your plan to solve the opioid addiction problem? Can you get into rural economies and really try to fix those problems? Can you go full front into urban areas and say, I'm going to fix your schools with charter schools and school choice, like Donald Trump is messaging, and with Betsy DeVos as Secretary of Education? That's a powerful opportunity. And the question, I think, for the next step in the campaign is, if Rob Whitman does get out, who does he endorse? That's a big one. And if he throws his support to Ed Gillespie, that's a big one.
That's a game changer.
Game changer.
That's a game changer. I mean, Whitman's got a lot of influence. I mean, you know what, Chris, you're right. That's a game changer, especially if he backs Gillespie now as the.
What if he doesn't? What if he doesn't?
It's a message.
What if he supports Frank Wagner?
I think Whitman holds a lot of cards in this. And for the people that were involved in the Trump campaign from the beginning, like me, first I was co-chair, then I was chairman. And I'll tell you this right on the air. I mean, there was never a single time, not one time, from the very beginning, if I didn't pick up the phone and call Rob Whitman or Catherine Whitman or anybody in the Whitman organization, and I asked for anything for Trump. I mean, at the beginning, I got whatever I needed. So maybe he didn't come out for him, but I wasn't turned down one time. Anything I asked them to do, they were there. And a lot of people saw that, but I think he's got a lot of influence. Now, when you get to his campaign and you look at his campaign manager, Chris Levitt, I haven't had the best personal relationship with him. We don't get along very well. There's a lot of reasons, but we'll let bygones be bygones. But having said that, I mean, the young man, this is now the third consecutive statewide race that he's going to run, right? Open Change 213, close race, lost. Gillespie 14, almost pulled the upset. Now he's back in 2017, right?
Is that a little bit like UVA's football coaches? You know, you have coaches that ought to be really good. They almost win a lot of key games, but they just don't.
No, listen. You got to go. You got it goes both ways.
Because there is something to be said with the experience.
Right. I know that I'm older than the rest of you, but the very
Even
first.
me?
Yeah, probably. I think.
I'm 58. You older than me?
The very first campaign I ran statewide was Marshall Coleman's race in 1989, and I accomplished something. We had the largest primary that is ever that we've had in Virginia, other than the presidential primary, and with three candidates who were very well known, and we managed to win that race by about 3,000 votes, and I was a genius. And then we ran against Doug Wilder in the general election, and I managed to lose that race by about 4,000 votes, 3,000 votes again. And I was the dumbest guy that ever walked the earth. Now, after I got, it takes a week or two to kind of sort that out in your mind. And then I realized, you know what? I wasn't as smart as they said I was at the beginning. I wasn't as dumb as they said I was at the end. But you learn you do learn from losses if you're, smart.
Right, Chris.
The key to all of that is relationships. Chris will have the relationships with the people on the ground who can pull the people out to the polls. And the structural organization, whether you like him or not, he'll have at least the knowledge by which you can translate that to relationships that pay off.
Okay, Aaron is shaking his head. It's like his head's going to explode.
No, I wouldn't say my head's going to explode. My experience is that Levitt doesn't like to reach out to people that are outside his social circle. And I think, Ed has, I was very impressed with the Matt Moran hire, and I like Michael Kogar a lot, and a number of people on the team.
Kogar, good.
But
hire.
the one thing that's very interesting about the Gillespie organization from the paid staff side is they are all members of of the same social circle. So I'd be interested in seeing if they bring people onto the team that are not part of the same echo chamber that could offer different thoughts.
Yeah, I like that. I like that commentary, because Matt Moran was in the Speaker's office. Right now, the House of Delegates is also up for election this year. Has 68 members of the General Assembly. So he has intimate relationships, or more so, with all those staff members and all of those House of Delegates who are running for re-election.
Absolutely.
That is a structural advantage going into the June primary when everyone else has those June primaries too.
Wow, you know what? That's astute. Chris, I thought Moran was the key hire he made, no question about it. He has the relationships, and he was a communications director. He was policy director. He's a very intelligent, very articulate, very upfront, fine young man. And all the dealings I've ever had with him have been fabulous. But you're right, he has those relationships. And remember, I mean, he was the right-hand man, or the figurehead, right? I guess you could say that Houghton is the right-hand guy, but he's behind the scenes, and he's got some enemies. But Matt was the face of the Speaker, and his right-hand man to the most powerful guy in Virginia for a very long time.
Well, a lot of those, what's going to happen in a lot of those districts, a lot of those voters who are close to the House members, they're going to be going, hey, who should we vote for in this race? Should we vote with this guy? And because they're going to be so closely tied with the Gillespie campaign, who's the House caucus getting behind? That's what's going on right now at these meetings and at the advance. Who are we getting behind? Who's our guy this year? Who are we going to fight for?
There'll be an interesting dynamic to see House versus Senate because Wagner's also lining up, and we'll get to Wagner later, but he's also lining up the senators in his corner and going to play that game like Gillespie does with Matt Moran.
Well, look out for some of those hires that are coming in the Gillespie campaign that'll ameliorate that.
But I think, though, guys, that the biggest thing to keep in mind with these statewide primaries is if somebody has a tremendous money advantage, is significantly outspending the other guys, that is the single biggest factor. If you're spending $3 million and everybody else is spending $1 million, then
well, that's where this race is at, right?
We'll
Gillespie's
see.
going to spend $3 million, and Wagner's going to raise.
You got to spend it well.
Well, you have to spend it well, and if you have too much bloating and too big a staff, that could be a problem too. But I go back to my previous primary experience for governor's races. And the thing to remember is in 1989, each of the three candidates spent $3 million each.
In 89?
In 1989. $1989, translate that to today.
Like $5 or $6 million.
That's like $6 million or more per candidate.
$6 million now.
I don't think anybody's going to make $6 million in this race.
Does social media flatline that?
It helps.
Can it?
I think it does some, but the truth is, it's TV advertising, it's mail, it's the building that organization. It's expensive.
We're going to be right back. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're live in Richmond today at the Republican Roundtable, getting set for the advance with Andrew's Army. You're with the Godzilla of truth in America, the Straight Talk Express. Right back. Stay with us.